Marina, good morning. Welcome back to those who regularly tune in to Westpac Smarts, and a warm welcome to those joining us for the first time. I'm Rosalind Stewart, Head of Hospitality, Tourism and Retail Trade for Westpac Business Banking. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by three panellists who are going to share their knowledge and experiences with you in navigating today's topic, which is the long-term prosperity of New Zealand tourism businesses. Our schedule, our session is scheduled to run for 45 minutes, with some flex should we run over time. The first 30 minutes will be a discussion with the panel, leaving time for Q&A at the end. Now, if you've attended a webinar of ours before, you'll know how to register a question for our panel. And if this is your first time joining us, there'll be a Q&A running live to the right of your screen. So register your questions as they come to mind, and please do indicate the panelist you'd like it directed to. If you like a question raised by someone, click on it to increase its rating, and we'll work our way through the highest rated questions first. Now, crucial to this discussion are the three experts joining me today. So let's make a start by having them introduce themselves. So over to you, Rebecca.
Kia ora. I'm Rebecca Ingram. I have the pleasure of being the Chief Executive of Tourism Industry Aotearoa. We are the Association for Tourism Businesses. We represent 1,300 tourism businesses throughout the motu, from smallest micro businesses right through to our large tourism businesses like Air New Zealand and Auckland Airport. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining Westpac in this Westpac Smarts webinar and to be welcoming and speaking with all of you online today. Westpac is a very much valued partner of Tourism Industry Aotearoa, and we're delighted to have the opportunity to have a conversation around the future of tourism with them today. Kia ora.
Thanks, Rebecca. Now over to you, Gavin.
Kia ora, good morning. My name's Gavin Oliver, and I've the great pleasure of being the Managing Director of an organisation called Ecozip Adventures. And we're a zipline and ecotourism business that was established out on Waiheke Island in 2012, soon to open a new location in Kaikoura. And I was reminded that the last time I did one of these was with a colleague of Paul and Rosalind some time ago, John Michelle, and we were talking about financial planning in times of uncertainty, and that was right back in the middle of the dark days of COVID and closed borders. So it's a real pleasure to be on here today talking about a much brighter future for tourism, and indeed working with Westpac. They've been part of us, they've been part of the journey for the new location in Kaikoura since day one. So it's going to be brilliant to be opening later in the year, and perhaps having some of our Westpac colleagues as VIPs first down the zip line. So Rosalind, put some travel budget aside.
Awesome, thanks, Gavin. Now over to our very own Paul Clark.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Name's Paul Clark. I'm the Industry Economist at Westpac. I sit within the economics team. I look at many different industries, and one of those, of course, is the tourism sector. So I was responsible for writing this paper, but I didn't write it by myself. We had a lot of help from industry participants and, of course, the TIA that helped frame up the question. So that was really good. And yeah, thank you very much for those that participated in the report. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Paul. So in Paul's latest research paper, he shares insights into how complex the tourism sector is. And so together with Gavin and Rebecca, we talked to the success factors required to sustain a competitive edge. So as a bit of background, before COVID in 2020, spending by domestic and international tourists was greater than $36 billion a year. Now, 44% of this was generated by international tourists. So having weathered the COVID storm, as the borders reopened, we saw a really strong start to recovery. But will this next stage be tougher as cost of living pressures impact people across the globe and competition for high quality visitors heats up? So to kick things off, I'd like to ask both Rebecca and Gavin, what is it like out there now? Gavin, you as an operator in the industry, and Rebecca, you as an industry representative. How is the tourism sector faring? And would you agree that things are likely to get a bit more challenging in the future? So I'll start with you, Rebecca.
Sure. Well, I think the tourism industry is a really significant contributor to New Zealand. There are approximately 145,000 New Zealanders who are directly employed by tourism, and that's growing every day as we recover our workforce, which means that tourism businesses right across New Zealand are making a difference to those households from which the food on the table, the electricity is coming from a really well-functioning, flourishing tourism industry. Yesterday marked 1 year since our borders were fully reopened. So just 365 days since we've been able to welcome visitors from anywhere in the world to Aotearoa. And the industry's recovery is not homogenous. So depending on where you are in the country and also the type of business that you have, where you're at in your recovery journey does differ. But in terms of arrivals, we're at about 2/3 of where we were in 2019, and we are looking at a very promising second summer of recovery. The other thing I'd say is that we can't take anything for granted. So tourism's a really important part of our economy. It also makes up a really important part of other countries' economies. And so you can see governments around the world investing in tourism recovery, investing in the kind of tourism they want to create, and trying to attract these very high quality visitors that we also want to find. So we can't take anything for granted. We need to ensure that as an industry, we've got our eyes set on the really positive contribution we want to make in New Zealand, but also that we're continuing to evolve and develop so that we can remain competitive in this global world of tourism.
Great insights. Thanks, Rebecca. And now I will hand over to you, Gavin, for your thoughts.
I think probably Rebecca and I are thinking very much in line. At an event recently with Tourism New Zealand, we were informed that we're at about 55% of pre-COVID holiday arrivals. So we're not, in terms of that recovery, whilst there is a sense that there's perhaps a lot of visitors in the country, we're not quite back to where we were. There is still quite a long way to go for us, and I think Rebecca's absolutely right in saying that it's not a completely level playing field. There are some parts of the country are doing better than others. Right now in Auckland, for example, my business is doing pretty well because of FIFA. So these marquee major events are really, really important. And to echo Rebecca's point, we find ourselves globally in an extremely competitive marketplace. Countries around the world are competing for the same high value travellers, and it's interesting. Rebecca will probably smile at this. I know the definition of high value traveller is something that comes up in conversation quite regularly in the industry, and what is a high value traveller? But they are, they're being actively sought by countries all over the world, and so for us it's important that we're out there and we're projecting New Zealand on a global stage. But the prognosis is quite good at the moment. Certainly coming into this year, summer looks, forward bookings are looking quite good. We're feeling quite positive. There will be some downward pressure on domestic travel, I think, because of cost of living issues, but generally the prognosis, the immediate short-term prognosis, is quite good.
That's great. Thank you, Gavin. It sounds like this FIFA World Cup has been really positive for the tourism industry. So long may that last. So now, Paul, your report suggests that tourism firms will need to be adaptable if they're going to best navigate the future. And it then goes on to identify 3 key aspects of adaptability. Would you mind elaborating on what each of these are for us?
Yeah, sure. So the report suggests that in order to be competitive on a sustained basis, firms need to really boost their dynamic capabilities. And there's really 3 aspects to that. And the report goes into quite a lot of detail. But the first is the ability to sense opportunities that are generated in the operating environment. And I think that's the first thing. And I'll go into a little bit more detail just now. The second is the ability then to mobilize the resources and assets of the firm in such a way so you can actually grab those opportunities. And I think the third, once you've been able to get those resources together, the third is basically to sort of transform or reconfigure your business operations to actually ensure that you not just seize those opportunities, but ensure that they create sustainable value. So I'll just go into a little bit more detail on what we mean by sensing opportunities. And I think in simple terms, the better a firm can detect changes in their operating environment, the greater the chance they will to be able to identify opportunities more quickly than their rivals. And those that do that well, you typically have that ability to kind of sense those weak signals rather than the obvious signals that everybody else connects. And what kind of signals are those? So those would be things like government regulation, changes in advances in digital technology, understanding what's coming up. But there's a whole lot of other stuff that firms need to do. The second part is really seizing those opportunities, and that's really, as I said, was about mobilizing the resources and associated capabilities to develop new services. Resources in that regard refer basically to the equipment that you have, the competencies a firm has, and the skills, and how do you actually put those together. And also it's about designing new business models. And I suppose the third thing is around transformation, which is taking all those resources and actually not just redesigning business models, you do that as part of season, but actually implementing new business models. And there's a whole lot of actions that sit underneath that, and we'll go to those later in the webinar. Underpinning all of this is basically this idea of technology and how technology is changing the environment in which firms operate. It was said to me yesterday, that's true, but this is ultimately a people's business. And I think the report accepts that. But technology is changing the face of the industry, this industry as in other industries. So that's something to look out for. So that's my three minutes.
Thank you, Paul. So, Rebecca, from your perspective, how well placed are firms in New Zealand to sense and seize opportunities as well as transform themselves?
Well, I think there's two things that spring to mind for me when I think about that question. The first is there's not a tourism business still operating that hasn't innovated over the last 3 years. The reality is the scale of disruption that the industry experienced as a result of our closed borders and COVID has created a level of innovation and courage, bravery, changing the way we do things that I think sets us up for what's to come. There's a reality of tourism, though, and this is articulated in the report, was that the majority of the tourism industry is made up of small and medium businesses. So there's the appetite for taking on new innovation, for really engaging in new technologies, and then there's the capacity for you to be able to do it when you're also just trying to run your zip line or take people out on the kayak. And so there are certain qualities of the industry that necessitate us taking different kinds of actions to ensure that these businesses are given the tools and capability to be able to make progress. The other thing I'd say is data is critical, and I think, Paul, you make that point in the report. But the report also says that there's not good data on tourism businesses, so we've had to use a proxy. We've had to use accommodation and hospitality businesses as a proxy for tourism. And so one of the things we could really benefit from as an industry, if we are going to move forward, to innovate, to adapt new technology, is to have really good information. And so we would love to see, as an association, some progress around the kind of data sets, intelligent data sets, that we could be making available to the industry to be able to dive in and see what they could be doing to evolve.
No, that makes total sense. Thank you, Rebecca. Now, Gavin, are you able to talk to your own personal experiences of being able to sense and seize opportunities? And then you may also have some examples of how businesses might have transformed themselves to capitalize on those opportunities.
Yeah, look, if we look at the Ecozip business initially, and a practical example is that a tangible demand amongst a growing cohort of consumers around sustainable tourism. And a report by Expedia recently said that 3 in 4 consumers surveyed, and they surveyed 26,000 travellers in 13 different markets. So this is a very significant survey. Said that, so 3 in 4 said they would adopt, or they would patronise businesses that had a clearly articulated social conscience, and particularly they would pay more for activities where it left a tangible benefit either on the community or the landscape of the places or of the businesses they visited. Now, we've started to see that come through in consumer sentiments. So the way it's changed our business is we've now moved some of our sustainability credentials right to the very fore of how we talk to our consumers. So we do talk to them about the adventure aspect of what we do and how they can come and have fun. But we also now talk to them just as much about how we use their time and their money and almost their investment in spending time with us to improve the physical landscape and things like that. So that's a very practical sense of feeling where the market is going. And in the conversation prior to coming on air, we were talking, and Rebecca rightly pointed out, this is going to become a bigger issue for the entire industry as we go forward. So this is something we're sensing across the industry. How other people are doing it, I read a fascinating article this week. The guys down at Redwoods in Rosalind are using AI as a way of engaging with their customers, and their volume of direct business has almost doubled because of it. And then similarly, you know, the guys at Zorb and how they're using technology to better engage with their customers. So these are the things. I mean, Rebecca's rightly said that we're always going to be a human-facing industry. We are. I mean, tourism is about people buying people and engaging with people and learning about Aotearoa New Zealand through those people. The technology can supplement and can enhance that, and it's using that smartly. I think one of the challenges is, again, as Rebecca said, we're an industry largely of SMEs, so it's capability. It's how do we get those tools to small businesses, and particularly small business owners right now who are emerging from 3 very torrid years and are probably head down and tail up and just trying to cope with what's on their plate without thinking about emerging technologies.
No, very good points. Thanks, Gavin. So over to you, Paul. The report also talks about practical steps that tourism firms should take to improve their adaptability. Could you expand on these steps?
Yeah, sure. So well, first of all, I'd like to say that we acknowledge that basically most firms in the industry are pretty small and very much involved in operational detail, the here and now. And so some of these steps are kind of a wish list, for want of a better word. So there were 5 things that the report really identified, and I think the first one was to obtain and analyze data, and that really talks about the analytical capabilities of these firms. In terms of not just the analytical capabilities, the ability to pick up these weak signals, but also basically to improve the analytical maturity, for want of a better word. So that basically means not only being able to describe what has happened and do a bit of diagnostic testing on why it might have happened, but also to predict what might happen in the future. And in some cases, when you get really fancy, you get into shaping that future as well. And that is possible through some of these new technologies. The second thing, and we talked about this a little bit off air earlier, was this creating and leveraging of this tourism ecosystem. And this is about creating partnerships with individual other players in the industry and building, I think, capacity through mergers and acquisitions, strategic alliances and joint ventures of the kind. And there's many examples of that, and we were talking about those earlier. The third thing that we talk about is engage with the customer on their terms. And that's where I sometimes say that is be where the customer is always, and be in front of the customer irrespective of when and where and how they might interact. And that really talks a little bit like we see in other sectors, particularly in retail, where we've moved from single market channeling all the way through to omni-channel marketing. And we're saying we're probably at the moment somewhere between single and multiple channel marketing. We're not quite at omni-channel. There are some examples of that happening as well. So be where the customer is. The fourth, I suppose, is eliminate the barriers to innovation. So the report does talk about some of the constraints that are facing the industry. And while there are examples of innovation, if you look at the stats kind of suggest that actually there is some room to go on that. And one of the key elements to that is freeing up management time. And the report goes into a lot of more detail than that, but freeing up management time is key because they tend to be involved, especially for smaller firms, often in the operational detail. I suppose last but not least is this idea of using digital technologies to completely develop new business models and completely change how businesses operated. But that's nice to have. Most tourism firms use digital technologies to digitize their operations. There's a shift from digitizing into digitalizing, which basically means changing everything you do and using technology to do that. So those are the 5 kind of key things on our wish list. It'd be really good if firms were able to do that. I realize there are constraints in that regard, but that's what the report kind of suggests.
Thanks, Paul. So yes, that is a lot of steps, but I'm wondering, Rebecca, are you able to talk to examples of how you might have seen the sector improving analytical capabilities or creating and preserving the tourism ecosystems?
Well, one of the things I saw happen a lot over the last couple of years is utilising the space that COVID gave us to think about what is your heartland experience. Like, what is it that your business is really, really good at, and how do you ensure that that's protected and then delivered beautifully? And so what I have been able to see across a variety of different businesses actually is they've looked at actually what is maybe reducing their product set. Like this is what we're going to offer, and we're going to offer it really well. Looking at where they've traditionally had problems through their customer experience and looking at how they can solve for making a beautiful experience right throughout the journey. And technology can play a role in that, definitely. And also technology can give you a lot of signals around where you've got pain points or where you've got opportunities for productivity benefit, where you can automate some things that maybe you're doing manually, but it's often quite hard to know where to start. Like, what technology? What is the app? What is the process? And so I really would guide people to speak to other tourism businesses in your community who are maybe trialing some things and say, how's it going? What have you connected with Xero that's made your billing process simpler? How have you used a chatbot to improve your customer experience online when you're asleep and your visitor is in the US and is wanting to find out more about what you offer? How have you done those things? So have a chat to people around you. Sometimes people have tried something and it's worked really well, or they've tried something and it's not been as successful for them, so they can give you some advice. But also have a look at Digital Boost. There is this amazing toolkit in Digital Boost, which includes a section specifically for tourism around case studies on how tourism businesses are using digital technologies. You have to register for it, but it's a wealth of information. And so if you're looking for where do I start if I'm thinking about innovation and technology and digitizing or digitalizing, as the case might be, there are places you can go, and I'd recommend Digital Boost as a start.
That's awesome, Rebecca. Thanks. Some really good insights. So now over to you, Gavin. Are you able to talk to examples of engaging with customers on their own terms and eliminating those barriers to innovation, and again, the use of digital technologies to streamline operations?
Yeah, thanks, Ros. Yeah, look, if we talk just momentarily about the Ecozip experience and what we're doing. So we're undergoing a major redevelopment of our web presence right now, and some of the things we're looking at in that sphere of engaging customers on their own terms is literally one-click shopping. So making it very, very easy for customers to get through the buying process, so there are not multiple barriers. Grouping information into ways to make it easy for customers to discover. So we call it a discovery phase, so that when customers come onto the website, they should easily be able to find that which it is they're looking for. Obviously, a chatbot is part of this, and an intelligent AI-driven chatbot is part of the new website. And it will answer questions hopefully, or will learn and will answer the bulk of the questions that our customers are asking quite quickly. If I then look at what some other people are doing, I spent some time with a wine tour operator about a week ago, and it was fascinating to be sitting with her while she was busily working on a presentation that she's delivering to Rebecca later this morning. And while she was doing that, her chatbot was answering questions from customers, but her chatbot was sufficiently intelligent that it knew when the customer had asked a difficult question, and it routed the live conversation to her. So this is a very small operator, really cleverly using digital technology to jump in, and where the chatbot kind of starts to stutter almost, she's then able to create a human connection with that customer, and take the customer on the buying journey. So we keep people in the equation, and I found that fascinating to watch. The other practical example is one that we're looking at the moment is automated replies to consumer reviews. So things like TripAdvisor reviews and Google reviews and so on and so forth. And we're currently evaluating a digital solution to answer those reviews for us, because it brings us back to that process of freeing up management time, because otherwise somebody's sitting there and writing these things. The challenge, of course, is it has to remain personal. The consumer wants to think that a human has answered that review, and not AI. So and it's kind of nascent technology. We're not quite there yet, but it's beginning to move in that direction. And interestingly, we're now seeing people like QRC, Queenstown Resort College, where I am today. They're actually offering a course in AI for small businesses, specifically targeted at small businesses, where perhaps a 1 or 2 person operation, where they don't have time to go out and take a deep dive, but they can get enough to start utilizing some of this technology. And I think many of these things, it's trying to find ways to enable small businesses to capitalize on this stuff when they are time poor, as Paul's report points out.
Thank you, Gavin. I can already see we're getting a few questions through around this topic, so we might get back into that a little bit during the question time. But I think both Rebecca and Gavin, is there anything else you'd like to add from what you are seeing and hearing in the sector? And also just give us a snapshot of your view on the outlook for the industry more generally. It would be great if we could get your thoughts on that. I'll start with you, Rebecca, if that's okay.
Well, I'm an optimist. So, and I spend enough time with tourism businesses to know that they're also optimists. We are a very hopeful, positive industry, and I have a lot of confidence in our ability to innovate and to be able to adapt and take on these new technologies that suit us best, while also knowing what we're great at, which is that we are a people business. People come to New Zealand because they want to experience our landscapes, but they leave with an indelible mark and a huge appreciation for our people, because we're wonderful hosts. And so I see that being core to what we'll offer in the future. But there's no doubt that technology will continue to evolve and can make business easier. And so my job is to find ways to make it simpler for our tourism business members to flourish. And that will mean growing capability, doing things differently, utilising technology. But I have every confidence that they will, and that we're going to very exciting places.
Thanks, Rebecca. Gavin, can you add to that, please?
I think, again, at the risk of sounding like an echo chamber, I do want to echo what Rebecca just said, which I do think there's a sense of optimism out there. I think, having come through the last 3 years, to see tourism business owners, out there resilient, developing new products, and I'm acutely aware of some of this stuff because we work with some people that are doing things, and you are seeing new product development. You're seeing changes in the way that product is delivered, either changing to conform to consumer sentiment or changing to adopt technology. Things like, for example, we're looking at a live video feed so that you could, if you're ziplining with us, you can connect with mum at home in New York and she can watch you zipline down, simultaneously, and you can tell her about your experience. Through to, we're talking with a group of businesses. It's a reorganisation we put together ourselves to start data sharing. Because we recognise that our customers and their customers have, probably got similar interests. So how do we talk to each other, and how do we market to each other? So I think that the tourism sector is a very resilient, and I think it's a very inventive sector, and I think the prognosis for the future is good.
Excellent. I'd have to agree with what we are seeing through the businesses that we bank in the tourism sector. It's been what we have seen is a lot of businesses being incredibly resilient and taking the time to really look at how they can come out the other side and pick up on opportunities. So I think what this will do is lead into the questions. Now, I know, Gavin, you touched on this, and Rebecca, I know you've been asked this a number of times in the interviews in the last few days. But there is a lot of talk about AI and robotics in the tourism sector. What impacts do you see this having on the tourism industry?
Shall I kick off on that one?
Yes, please.
All right. So it's going to have an impact, because AI and robotics and innovation of technology is being infused into the way that we live now. So it's going to have an impact. What I see happening, though, is how we can leverage these tools, because they are tools, to make our experiences better. So where they can automate things for you and free up your time, and where they provide an opportunity for you to be able to utilize your team, your workforce, to prioritize experience and customer interaction and surprise and delight and really meaningful connections with your customers, because there is no replacement for a person. The reality is that as these technologies evolve, some things are going to become even more important, like trust. Can I trust that this is a real engagement? And tourism's one of those places where you know it's real because they're strapping you into a harness. And so there is, I think, an enormous opportunity for tourism as we think about the future of work and how technology is going to change the way we live, to know that when you're having an experience with the tourism business in New Zealand, it's real and you can trust it, and it's going to be something that you remember forever. So I see technology as a really important tool, one that we should be thinking about how we integrate into our businesses to give us the greatest opportunity for innovation and growth and impact. But also thinking really carefully about what is your heartland experience and how can technology improve it as opposed to take away from it. So that's how I think about things at the moment.
Great. Yeah, really good insights. Thank you. And Gavin, I know you touched on this earlier, but have you got anything to add to that?
I think that the technology, AI and the like, has its place in the tourism sector. It is, I think, the Heartland experience is still about people connecting with people and sharing their love of New Zealand and why they're so happy to call this place home and the things they love about it. That's fundamentally what tourism has always been about. Where the technology comes in is in two distinct phases of that planning process, which is the dreaming and planning, and before they arrive, and how do we get the right information to the right people to help them make informed decisions, and promoting New Zealand, and then sharing afterwards, because that's really important. We're a relatively small country, and in global scales, we have a very small budget for promotion. Somebody told me recently that the whole TNZ budget is slightly less than New York has to promote New York. So on a global stage, we don't have a lot of money. So we really do rely on our manuhiri going home and being advocates for New Zealand, and then giving them the technology to do that. So the technology needs to augment the human product rather than replace the human product. It should make business owners and operators, or it should free them up to do more of the things they're really good at, and then help sell that New Zealand story once visitors go home.
Thank you, Gavin. That makes perfect sense, and it really does lead into the next question we've got. Rebecca, you touched on trust. Now, this next question is, in the increasing usage of chatbots, etc., what can companies do to ensure the safety and security of data?
Oh gosh, that's a very good question, and I wouldn't suggest that I'm in any way an expert in chatbot technology, but I think This is about where you kind of make a careful choice around what technology you're going to bring into your business, and where you might want to talk to others in the tourism industry around what they're planning to use or are using, and how they have got the most out of their technology and what they've learnt as a result of using it. I think this is where it comes back to really thinking about what is your customer experience, what is the journey they're going to go on, where it's really important that that journey is personal and that there's a really strong people-to-people connection, and where in that journey there is the opportunity for automation. And so get very clear around how technology is going to be applied into your business, and that will help you decide, where and protect those things that are core to your experience. Data sovereignty, data protection, privacy, thinking about your terms and conditions of use, thinking about which providers you partner with are really important considerations. And so you do want to take the time to think about what technology you're bringing into your business and making sure you've got the capacity and capability to really leverage it, but also to really understand it.
No, that makes good sense. Thank you. And Gavin, from a personal perspective, have you got any insights to add to that? What have you done around safety and security of data that perhaps changed from 2 or 3 years ago?
And we work with a very good digital agency that helps us with this stuff. And again, you have to recognise that we're a small operation. We're not technological experts, so it's about making sure you're working with the right people, partnering with people that actually understand what they're doing and can give good advice. Particularly, we come back to the central, or one of the central precepts of Paul's report is that most of our tourism businesses up and down the country are quite busy. They're small organisations. These are people out there that are on the front line. So being backed up by operators that know what they're doing, or working with partners that know what they're doing. In our case, we work with Maverick Digital. Is really, really important, and that's the central thing: is use experts, rely on the experts. The other really interesting thing that came out, and I started reading yesterday, was that I didn't realize that AI hallucinates, and apparently if you keep feeding information into AI, eventually it starts replicating its own stuff, and this is where that question of trust comes around, and so there'll always need to be humans in there double checking some of this data and making sure that the stuff that it's churning out is accurate, as they're finding in the educational field now when kids are turning in essays written by chatbots.
I love it. AI hallucinates. That's the
phrase
I've
I was told.
That term. Yeah.
It was a new one on me yesterday, Ros.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I have one final question for you both. Being an election year, do you see that this is going to have an impact on domestic travellers? And Paul, you may also have some insights into this as well. So I'll start with you, Rebecca, and we can.
Well, I think the election year certainly changes things as everybody's putting forth their policies and talking about how they see the country. And I think, though, cost of living and the economic health of the country is the defining factor in terms of domestic visitation, how New Zealand households are faring and what that might mean for their travel plans. And I would always say that the tourism industry's here no matter what situation you find yourself in. So for some families, they might be thinking about staying closer to home and having a handful of special experiences with their family or their friends in their at home, in which case we're here to make those memories with you. A couple of key tips I would always give for people who are planning their holidays: book ahead and book direct if you can. Those things will make a difference for the tourism businesses, but also for your holiday experience. But it is, there's no denying it. It's pretty rocky out there at the moment. But I take a lot of heart from the fact that the tourism industry is recovering and making a really solid contribution to our economy. And as we recover, we will continue to support this economy and how it navigates this period of of recession and cost of living. It's really important that we can do our part to support the economic health and prosperity of the country.
Thank you. Gavin, what about you?
Yeah, Ross, I think undoubtedly the fact that we're moving into an election year will affect some consumer buying behaviour. It will be cost of living that drives a lot of this. But one of the great things to come out, there was a report released within the last couple of days from Cantor around New Zealand. New Zealanders' sentiment towards tourism, and it's up 89% of tourism. 89% of New Zealanders have a really strong positive vibe about tourism in New Zealand. And in fact, there's the cohort that thinks there should be more tourism has grown as well. So it's a good time, but I think, you know, with an election looming, people are looking at their wallets and their bank balances, and we could have a lean couple of months ahead until we start to see what's ahead of us. People are naturally cautious, I think, in election cycles, so this is going to be a couple of months to weather.
Yeah, very much so. Paul, did you have any insights to share here?
Well, I would agree with both our Rebecca and Gavin. I think that economic considerations will trump the uncertainties that surround the election, but certainly, yeah, we're looking at these cost of living increases, slowdown in demand that will affect, I think, domestic tourism. But on the positive side, I think that New Zealand is still an attractive place to visit, and you know, it's a once in a lifetime kind of experience. And we think that basically that it will continue to be attractive to international visitors. So we think the growth over the next wee while will come from international tourists, particularly out of China. We've seen a bit, but not nearly enough. And hopefully we should see something come out of the rest of the world as well. Geopolitical uncertainties, I suppose, would basically act the other way or have another impact, or slow that down. But yeah, we're generally positive for international tourists coming back to the country. I think there's still growth to be had. Not so much domestic tourists.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And I just want to thank you all for your time today, and a huge thanks to Gavin, Paul and Rebecca. Your knowledge has been invaluable, and I am going to take you up, Gavin, on your offer of the Kaikoura zipline when you open. So we will be providing a recording of this webinar to you after the event, and it will also include a link to Paul's industry research paper. Now you'll see that there is a survey poll to the right of the webinar. If you'd like to leave a rating or feedback, we'd really love to hear from you. And this is also an opportunity to share any thoughts or topics that you'd like us to cover in future. And please do keep an eye out for our future Westpac Smarts webinars. Thanks so much and have a great day.